You're listening to Short History Shorts Audio, where history speaks louder than images. In the early 2nd century BC, the ancient world stood poised for a clash of titanic proportions. In the West, the Roman Republic had emerged from the crucible of the Punic Wars, stronger, richer and more confident than ever before. In the East, the Seleucid Empire under King Antiochus III, known as Antiochus the Great, had restored much of its former power and prestige after decades of decline. These two worlds, the rising republic of the Mediterranean West and the sprawling Hellenistic monarchy of the East, would collide in a war that would not only determine the balance of power in the Eastern Mediterranean, but also set the tone for Rome's future as an imperial power beyond Italy and the Western seas. At the heart of the conflict lay overlapping ambitions, mutual suspicions, and the turbulent currents of Greek politics. The story begins with the aftermath of the Second Punic War. Rome's victory over Carthage in 201 BC had left it with unmatched influence in the Western Mediterranean, but it was far from content to remain a regional power. Rome had already shown interest in the affairs of Greece during the First Macedonian War, fought concurrently with Hannibal's invasion of Italy, but it was in the Second Macedonian War, 200–197 BC, that Rome made its real entrance into the Greek world. The defeat of Philip V of Macedon at the Battle of Cynoscephalae in 197 BC was not only a blow to Macedonian ambitions, but also a demonstration of the superiority of Roman legionary tactics over the traditional Macedonian phalanx. Rome declared the freedom of the Greeks at the Isthmian Games in 196 BC, but this was freedom under Roman oversight, and both friend and foe began to realize that Rome's intervention was not entirely altruistic. Meanwhile, Antiochus III had been on a remarkable campaign of restoration. Coming to the Seleucid throne in 222 BC, he inherited an empire that had lost much of its western territory and faced threats on multiple fronts. Yet Antiochus proved to be one of the most dynamic rulers of his age. He waged successful campaigns in the east, regaining lost provinces in Media, Parthia and Bactria, and even marched as far as India, echoing the conquests of Alexander the Great. In the west, he defeated the Ptolemaic forces in the Fifth Syrian War and took control of Coel, Syria and Palestine. His reign was, in many respects, a golden moment for the Seleucid state. But this resurgence inevitably brought Antiochus into contact and eventually conflict with Rome. The first seeds of tension were sown in the fragmented politics of Greece. With Philip V defeated, Rome withdrew most of its forces from Greece, but many Greek states remained divided and unstable. Into this unsettled world stepped Antiochus, who saw himself as the natural leader and protector of the Greek cities in Asia Minor and beyond. His ambitions, however, were immediately viewed with suspicion in Rome, which saw any expansion of Seleucid influence as a threat to its newly won position in the Aegean. The immediate spark came from the fate of the former Ptolemaic possessions in Asia Minor and Thrace. These territories had been occupied by Antiochus after the death of Ptolemy IV, but Rome and its allies, particularly the Kingdom of Pergamum under Eumenes II, disputed his right to hold them. Pergamum, a staunch Roman ally, feared Seleucid domination of Asia Minor, while Rhodes, another key Roman partner, worried about Antiochus controlling the lucrative trade routes of the eastern Mediterranean. Further complicating matters was the presence of a famous exile in Antiochus's court, Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who had brought Rome to the brink of defeat during the Second Punic War. Although Hannibal's role in the coming war was limited, his presence alone was enough to inflame Roman suspicions. By 192 BC, tensions had escalated beyond diplomacy. Antiochus landed in Greece with a modest army at the invitation of the Aetolian League, a confederation of Greek states hostile to Rome. The Aetolians hoped that Antiochus could rally Greek resistance against Roman influence, but his forces were too small to mount a decisive challenge. Rome reacted quickly, dispatching a large army under the consul Manius Acilius Glabrio. In 191 BC, the two forces met at the Battle of Thermopylae, a site already legendary in Greek history. Antiochus attempted to use the narrow pass as a defensive position, but the Romans outflanked him through the surrounding hills, much as the Persians had done to Leonidas centuries earlier. The Seleucid army was routed, and Antiochus was forced to retreat to Asia Minor. With Greece secured, Rome turned its attention to pursuing Antiochus on his own soil. The war shifted to Asia Minor, where Roman forces, under the consul Lucius Cornelius Scipio, accompanied by his more famous brother Scipio Africanus, advanced into Seleucid territory with the support of Pergamum and Rhodes. The decisive confrontation came in 190 BC at the Battle of Magnesia, near the modern-day Turkish town of Manisa. Antiochus commanded a vast army, possibly over 70,000 strong, including war elephants, cataphract cavalry, and a phalanx in the Hellenistic style. The Romans, numbering around 30,000, relied on the flexibility and discipline of their legions, supplemented by allied cavalry and the forces of Pergamum. The battle was fierce, but the outcome was clear. Roman tactics once again proved superior. The Seleucid left wing collapsed under the combined assault of Roman infantry and Pergamene cavalry, while the centre was broken by disciplined legionary advances. Antiochus's elephants caused confusion among his own troops, and soon the entire army was in retreat. The defeat at Magnesia was catastrophic. In the peace settlement that followed, the Treaty of Apamea in 188 BC, Antiochus was forced to give up all his territory in Asia Minor, north of the Taurus Mountains. These lands were divided between Rome's allies, Pergamum and Rhodes, significantly expanding their power and influence. Antiochus also had to pay a massive indemnity of 15,000 talents of silver, surrender his war elephants, and limit his navy to just 12 ships. Perhaps most humiliatingly, he was required to hand over hostages to Rome, one of whom was his son, the future Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Antiochus himself was killed in 187 BC while attempting to plunder a temple in Elymais to pay his debts, a grim end for a king once hailed as the Great. The Roman-Seleucid War had far-reaching consequences. For Rome, it marked its emergence as a power in the eastern Mediterranean, setting the stage for deeper involvement in Greek and Asian affairs. The defeat of Antiochus removed the last major Hellenistic rival to Roman influence in the Aegean, leaving only Macedon as a potential threat. A threat that would be eliminated within a few decades. For the Seleucid Empire, the war was a turning point from which it never fully recovered. The loss of Asia Minor deprived it of crucial resources and revenue, while the crushing indemnity strained its finances. In the broader sweep of history, the war illustrated a fundamental shift in Mediterranean geopolitics. The balance of power that had existed since the breakup of Alexander's empire was giving way to a new order dominated by Rome. The legions had demonstrated their superiority over the Hellenistic armies, not only in tactics, but in the political will to project power far from home. The Roman-Seleucid War was more than a conflict over territory. It was the moment when the idea of a Roman Mediterranean, stretching from Spain to Asia, began to take shape in earnest. And for the cities and kingdoms of the East, it was a stark warning. The Republic's reach was long, and its ambitions longer still.